Glory be, it's another football weekend. We got prospects to watch and rookies in the crosshairs right here on Locked On NFL Draft.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, yeah, the weekend is here. Well, not really, but close enough. But you know, your draft trio is here. I'm Locked On NFL Draft, former NFL, AFL defensive back Eric Crocker, along with my man from Rogue Analytics, the smartest man in the room. Just ask him, Ryan Tracy. And, of course, I am John Harris, football analyst, silent reporter for the Houston Texans, and also the owner-operator of footballtakeover.com. Boys, how we doing?
Creeping up to college football Saturday, man, and just kind of putting all those games on the big screen. It's exciting. Exciting to talk about some of the big prospects in some of these games coming up.
And we are going to do that. But we're going to remind you that today's episode of Locked On NFL Draft is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Now, we're going to have a little special Prize Picks more or less later in the show. But with college games and a big, big weekend, boys, coming up this weekend in college football. Now, it starts on Thursday, a couple of games on Thursday, but the majority of the big ball games are coming up on Saturday. So, let's dive in. Players, prospects, matchups that you are excited to watch this weekend that you will have your eyes on. Ryan Tracy, let's start with you. Where are your eyes going to be on Saturday watching prospects? Maybe it's not even prospects. Maybe just one of your favorite players in college. Where are your eyes going to be on Saturday?
Well, my favorite, we'll talk about him later. That's Daniels there at KU, Rock Chalk. But the game that I'm going to be watching first and foremost is the D-line unit for Clemson, coming off a really emotional process through this. They've got 2 huge prospects in Bresee, and Murphy. I was a little more keyed in on Murphy early in the year. Clearly, this has been such a unique process for them, and the whole story. And folks, if you don't know about the story about Bresee's sister, etc. This is a difficult thing to overcome if you are a college kid and you're at the height of what you're supposed to be doing. I want to see how they respond. There's a lot of emotion. I think it's going to be a lift overall.
Yeah, no doubt. Brian Bresee's sister, Ella, passed away due to cancer. He missed last week against Louisiana Tech. And want to make sure that we give a shout-out to Louisiana Tech Bulldogs. You don't see this often, but last week when Bresee was out of that game, every single member of the Louisiana Tech traveling party wrote a note of kudos and thoughts and prayers to Bryan Bresee. And I just thought that was – that just was incredible to see. I'm kind of a softie as it is, but I shed a tear definitely seeing that. All right, Croc, what do you got your eyes on this weekend? I know your Trojans are going up to Oregon State, where they have struggled in the past, signed Jaquiz Rogers 2008. But I don't know if you're watching prospects there, but where are your eyes going to be on Saturday?
Definitely Jaxon Smith-Njigba. All right, this is a big-time prospect. People are expecting him to be potentially wide receiver 1 in this class, and he's going up against a good Wisconsin defense. But he hasn't really been out there. He's been hurt. He's been banged up. He's missed time. And during that time, Marvin Harrison Jr. has been able to kind of steal his shine a little bit. And obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. not ready to come out this class. He's a true sophomore. But will he take away targets from Jaxon Smith-Njigba, or will they both eat, which we've seen several receivers in the past, groups at Ohio State, everybody kind of get theirs. I think for him, though, just kind of getting back on track and inserting his name back in that, hey, I'm the top dog in this receiver class, that's something that I'm definitely interested to see. How does he continue on, and does he continue to kind of build that rapport that he had with C.J. Stroud that he ended the season with in 2021?
Yeah, no doubt. I think he is you guys know how I feel about him. I put him ahead of Keyshawn Butte, and you guys were ready to drive to Houston and slap some sense into me. So I think it's a massive game for him coming off of that injury early in the Notre Dame game, missing a few games, missing the the scrimmages, if you will, for the next couple of weeks to get ready for this game against Wisconsin. I love a matchup in this Wisconsin game of Nick Herbig, the outside linebacker, edge rusher, not a big guy at all, going against Paris Johnson. Herbig's the kind of guy that could give Johnson some issue because a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller, but he is quick and he's really good with his hands, so I'm curious to see that. But the matchup I'm really intrigued by, and it brings quarterbacks into play, and that's Florida-Tennessee. I think Hendon Hooker from Tennessee is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the country. I have him, I think, at number 80 in my Harris 100. I think Hendon Hooker can be a really solid football player at the next level. And when I watched him at Virginia Tech, and maybe it was just the thought of Virginia Tech, I just, whatever. Like, there's just nothing there. I was, like, not excited. When he went to Tennessee, I was like, okay, whatever. Then I watched him last year, and every time I watched him, I thought, man, this guy's really solid. And he's continued that this year. He's got a great wide receiver in Cedric Tillman. And we know the guy on the other side. And I get you guys' thoughts on Anthony Richardson from out of Florida. 1 week, looks like a superstar against Utah. The next week against Kentucky, he throws 2 horrible interceptions. Last week against USF, he really can't get it going, but his run game is great. Your thoughts on Anthony Richardson, Eric Crocker, what have you seen thus far from the big-time athlete but sketchy and inconsistent quarterback?
Big-time potential, and I like how you said big-time athlete because so far that's kind of what he is, more so an athlete playing quarterback as opposed to a quarterback that is athletic. Right, he definitely has to continue to kind of refine that passing game and be more consistent in that department. A lot of people talked about in the offseason reworking some of his mechanics and whatnot to where he could be more consistent as a passer. But right now, it's been extremely up and down. I think if you're Florida, you know he has that big playability. And I definitely want to apologize to not just Florida, but Florida Gators as well. A couple of days ago, I said that they both had lost. I don't know what I was thinking, but they actually both won their games late. But Anthony Richardson, playmaker, we know that. Big time ability, we know that. Can he be more consistent? I think that's the big question mark.
Yeah, Ryan, your thoughts?
It's all about
Anthony Richardson.
All about the flashes. If he can settle that down, he's going to be all right. But I think also in making some of the mistakes and making some of the stumbles, he will learn from that. I think that we've seen him progress from last season to this pretty dramatically. Now, if he can take that next step forward, I think he will solidify himself.
No doubt.
Real quick, John, one guy that you brought up, you kind of mentioned him in passing, but Cedric Tillman, and this is a guy I kind of thought would come out last year, but he stayed there at Tennessee. Big wide receiver, big catch radius, legit hands. He can win vertically down the field. Last week, kind of had a down game, but, I mean, they didn't really need him against that who they play? Akron?
I think.
I believe it was Akron, and they won like 60-something to like 0, or it was something crazy like that. But against Pittsburgh, they really needed him, and that was where he did his most work, having almost 200 receiving yards in that game. So he's a guy I've seen have big time moments. He did it last season, playing against, I believe it was Alabama and Georgia. Probably had his best games of the year against both of those big time opponents. So he's a guy I think a lot of people should really be paying attention to. I mentioned Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Everybody talks about him. We talked about him on the show. Who's talking about Cedric Tillman? That's a guy that everybody needs to watch out for.
Yeah, I've got him at number 33 in the Harris 100. I'm a big fan of Cedric Tillman. To me, I think he is a little bit faster, a little bit more elite athlete than Nico Collins that I get to see every single day here in Houston. I just had a chance to interview, and what a sweetheart he is. But I think Tillman can be that kind of player. When we get back, we're going to jump to the NFL. Guys that were stars last year in college are now stars as rookies in the NFL. A little either or with some matchups coming up next. But before we go to break, I confess this all the time. I'm 50. I am getting older, and I felt it. Last week, I was not on the show because I had something going on with my knee, and it was all a result of feeling my age, my dad bod. And it's not my fault. I mean, I'm just old. That's just the way it goes. Well, do I want to get more energy to counter the negative physical effects of aging? Nugenix Total T Testosterone Booster with Testofen will help you turn back the clock, re-energize your workouts, get you better results at the gym, and help you look and feel like the man you want to be. That's going to help me. Nugenix Total T contains man-boosting key ingredients like Testofen. It has been validated in 5 clinical studies shown to boost free testosterone levels in men. Now get a complimentary bottle for Nugenix Total T when you text NFL to 231231. Text now and get a bottle of Nugenix Thermal, their most powerful fat incinerator ever. I mean, let me say that again. The most powerful fat incinerator ever. Doesn't everybody want to have that? Not just old guys like me. You got to get it too. It's got key ingredients to help you get back into shape fast. Absolutely free. Text NFL to 231-231. That's NFL to 231-231. All right, boys, you know I love either or. And we're going to do it right here. Usually you say it for the last segment. We got a little something different for the last segment. We're going to go NFL rookies either or in their matchups this weekend. You know how this goes. We've done this before. So I got a few of them. And we're going to start right off the bat with my guy. Here we go. Either or. Derek Stingley Jr. facing Justin Fields in the Bears passing game that is averaging 76.5 yards per game. Think about that for a second. Or Sauce Gardner versus Joe Burrow in the Bengals passing game. Ryan Tracy, choose your fighter. Either or, Derek Stingley Jr. versus Justin Fields in the Bears. Sauce Gardner versus Joe Burrow and the Bengals' explosive offense.
Now, the Broncos didn't trade Sutton to Chicago, did they?
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Oh, boy. No, they
Okay.
didn't. In fact, it's Darnell Mooney and Equinemius St. Brown. So it's a little different pass-catching crew. I see what you're doing there.
Do you see? Okay. If you're asking me to pick who's going to make a bigger impact on the game, it's going to be Stingley. I don't think they can even go at him very much, to tell you the truth. In terms of who's going to have more opportunity to get his hands on the ball, it's probably going to be Sauce. So that could turn either way. It could be a very light stat line for Stingley because I don't think he's going to get much action.
I think I'm with you on that from that standpoint. Sauce is going to get himself some action. Eric Crocker, pick your fighter. Derek Stingley Jr. versus Justin Fields and the Bears or Sauce Gardner and the Joe Burrow and Bengals.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Derek Stingley Jr. on this one. And I kind of wanted to go with Sauce Gardner as well. You've seen how young Joe Burrow has been turning the ball over, and I think a lot of it has to do with his offensive line's inability to really protect him. So time clock working kind of fast, throwing passes all over the place. But aside from that, man, I mean, you talked about the Chicago Bears and what they're getting out of the passing game right now. It's less than ideal. And outside of a couple of busted plays against my San Francisco 49ers, the passing game from the Chicago Bears has been very ineffective. So can they get it going against Houston? I don't think so. I think Lovie Smith is going to have a really good game plan. Has these young guys out there getting in the groove now. Derek Stingley Jr., I know he's waiting to kind of really put that legit game together. I think a game against the Chicago Bears where it's like, well, I got to worry about Mooney, and that's about it. I think that's the recipe for success for the young guys. So I'm going to go with Derek Stingley Jr.
Eric, before I hop off of this, you guys mentioned Cortland Sutton, right? You talked about Cortland Sutton because that's who Stingley matched up with a lot. Now it's Darnell Mooney, who is definitely not Cortland Sutton, but he's got a different gear speed-wise. The preparation for different types of receivers as a young guy, what's the most difficult thing that Sting is facing? And the fact that last week it was a big physical guy. This week, a little bit smaller, but man, this dude's really got some jets. As a young guy, what's he sort of up against? You play that position, you know it. When he's out on an island, what's the most difficult thing for him against a guy like Mooney versus against Sutton?
I think just in general is thinking too much, right? And the more you're thinking about what it is that your responsibilities are and how to adjust to certain things, the slower you play. You don't get to be you. You don't get to be the full version of whatever it is that you're potentially going to be. And you see a lot of that early on in a lot of cornerback. They're transitioning into the NFL. You know, I've talked about all the different things that I've faced, and I didn't see a lot of this in college like some of these guys, so I was even less prepared for it. But, you know, they have adjustments to everything. Bunches, motioning from one side to the other. The play can switch. It's not as simple as just, hey, man, you just go out there and play man coverage, right, like Stingley did a lot at LSU.
Right.
So I think just having a lot more responsibility from the mental standpoint, which makes you play slower, that's the biggest hurdle that he has to jump over.
All right, let's go to the next one. It's wide receiver time. Last week against the Browns, Garrett Wilson was awesome. Caught fade route, beautiful release for the touchdown. Then he had the game winner to beat the Browns. Thank you very much, Garrett Wilson. He faces the Bengals defense this week, or Jahan Dotson is going against the Eagles defense. Eric Crocker, we'll start with you. Pick your fighter, Garrett Wilson versus the Bengals D or Jahan Dotson versus the Eagles defense.
Well, I'm not going against Darius Slay, who's out there for the Philadelphia Eagles. So Dotson, that's off the board. All right, so we're going to go Garrett Wilson here against Cincinnati. I'm curious to see what he's able to do consistently against Cincinnati secondary. There are no slouches back there. I think they have some talent on that back end. I think it's probably one of the more underrated groups, especially in their Super Bowl run. And I know they had a little bit of change over there. But for the most part, man, I take my chances with that as opposed to whatever's going on in Philly, because I don't know if y'all watched that Monday night game where Darius Slay was guarding Justin Jefferson. And when you talk about locking somebody up, I mean, in jail, throw away the key, do not pass go, do not collect $200, like whatever saying you want to throw out there. Yep. That's what Darius Slay said to Justin Jefferson. So, oh man, that was just, it was lovely to watch as a defensive back. But if I'm a receiver and I'm Dotson and I got to go up against that, no, sir, I don't want any parts of that. So, yeah, give me Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, that was clamps. I mean, it was just all day. That was impressive. I mean, Philly, I kind of had this sneaky suspicion about Philly going into the year. Oh, boy, they're better than I thought. Ryan, do you agree with Eric? Garrett Wilson versus the Bengals or Jahan Dotson versus the Eagles D?
The only thing that I would disagree with is if I'm the Eagles, do I want him on Jahan Dotson? Or am I sticking him on Terry McLaurin? Because that's my plan. I want to take away McLaurin and take away the best option they have. And if Dotson eats it up against somebody else, I'm going to take my chances with the Rook over Scary because I think he's going to hurt me more. So I'll probably go the opposite direction.
I like that thought process.
I think what they might end up doing, and this is, I think Belichick was one of the first ones to do this. They used to do this against DeAndre Hopkins. They would take the second corner. They would take Logan Ryan and put him on Hopkins and then give Logan Ryan help and then take their second guy, their top guy, and put him on our guy, and they just shut us completely out. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they take Slay and don't put him on McLaurin, but they put two guys on McLaurin, and then they put Slay over on Dotson. So I think that could help slow him down a little bit, if you will. All right, last one. And Ryan, you get this one, and you'll see why. Travon Walker is going out to L.A. We need you, Chargers. We need you to knock off the Jags. He's taking on the Chargers. George Karlaftis is going to Indianapolis, and the Indianapolis Colts offensive line has been a mess. Pick your fighter, either Travon Walker against the Chargers or George Karlaftis versus the Colts.
I got to take the hometown guy. Karlaftis, I think he's been pushing pretty well. Tied with Aiden Hutchinson with the most pressures produced so far. He just hasn't finished. This is the week that he finishes. I expect Matt Ryan to get to know him pretty well. But I will say, I'll be pulling for Travon Walker because we'd like to see them beat them Chargers again, too.
I don't know about that. Eric, Travon Walker versus the Chargers or George Karlaftis versus the Colts?
I'm going to go Karlaftis versus the Colts because right now the Colts just look like a disaster. Matt Ryan, he can't move. So if I am betting on one of these guys to have a big game, it would definitely have to lean towards Karlaftis. I don't know what's going on with Indianapolis. Getting blanked against the Jacksonville Jaguars, that's never ideal. So she's 24-0? What? I mean, you're just playing with an ineffective quarterback who maybe his age is catching up to him. So I'm going to go with Karlaftis to really put some pressure on him.
Yeah, I think Karlaftis is going to give the Colts all kinds of issues. I mean, we weren't able to always press that button against them, but even we were able to get some pass rush pressure on Matt Ryan. And it showed. I knew he was going to have some issues in the game. He started pulling out from center early, dropped one snap that ended up getting in our hands. He dropped another one because he was getting out there early. He was worried about the pass rush. It's just going to get worse, I think, for Matt Ryan in Indianapolis. We get back. I told you today's title sponsor is Prize Picks. Well, their game is more or less. We're going to play that game next right here on Locked On NFL Draft. But Croc talked about betting. Well, let's talk about betting. Let's talk about BetOnline.net, your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information. With live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. MMA, boxing, golf, everything you're looking for. Major League Baseball, getting into the playoffs or near the playoffs. My Houston Astros have won the AL West again. Maybe they'll win another World Series too. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. All right. We talked about Prize Picks being our title sponsor for the show, so we tip of the cap with this final segment. It's called More or Less. Very simple concept. Will John Harris eat more than 2 slices of deep dish pizza in Chicago? More or less 2 pieces. It's going to be more. I can promise you that. So that's
it was
how
more
this
when
works.
I was in Chicago. I went to the 49ers Chicago game.
Yeah.
And Giordano's downtown.
Right.
Oh man, that was my first time trying deep dish pizza, especially from Chicago. I had to do it, but I know I'm off subject a little bit. It was good.
No, it's okay. We got to eat well, man.
It was good.
We've got to. Okay, here we go. Let's start. Ryan Tracy, you go first. CJ Stroud is facing a stout Wisconsin defense. Wisconsin's 2-1. They lost to Washington State, but they only gave 17 points in that game. Jim Leonard does a great job with that defense. CJ Stroud, more or less, 3 touchdowns passing versus Wisconsin on Saturday.
Jason is back. Yes, that's our premise here. Yes. Then yes. More. I'll take the more.
Okay, Eric Crocker, you go more or less 3 touchdowns for CJ Stroud versus the Wisconsin defense.
Yeah, I'm going to go more. And I have a lot of respect for Wisconsin's defensive coordinator, Jim Leonard. But, man, I feel like C.J. Stroud, even in games where he doesn't play extremely well, he still throws for a bunch of touchdowns. I remember watching him against, was it Oregon? Ohio State played early last season. And it was like, oh, man, you got Stroud. He's all over the place. But it still threw for like 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. So whether he's playing good or bad, the yards, the production, the touchdowns will be there. So I'm going to go with the higher on that one.
All right, Eric Crocker, we're going to you for this one. Fight on, baby. Travis Dye, running back for the Trojans. More or less 96 rushing yards versus the 3-0 Oregon State Beavers up in Corvallis.
I'm going to go with lower on this one because, he shares the backfield with some talented guys. Also, last game, he kind of had like a shoulder injury for a while, so we'll see how he's recovering from that. Will he be playing? Will he be full go? Will they put the load on him? But he's a guy that runs well, and I talked about him, man, out there with no gloves, no sleeves, no nothing, just out there just bare everything. It looks funny, but he runs strong. He pass protects well. He catches the ball well, but I think in this game, they're going to take a little bit off of his shoulders, put some on some of these other talented running backs that they have.
Ryan Tracy, Travis Dye, more or less 96 rushing yards against the Beavers in Corvallis.
I tell you what, this kid's scrappy. Always has been. Yep. I'm not too worried. If they're going to let him go, I think he's going to be full strength. I'll take the over. The more.
More 96 yards. Nice. Okay. Now this one I threw in there. This guy, he's been forgotten about. When he was at Indiana, he had some great victories. Led Indiana to bowl games, but he can never stay healthy. Every year ended with a season-ending injury. And then with all the transfer portal quarterbacks moving, we all forgot about Michael Penix. I know I did. And it wasn't until I watched the Washington spring game, about a month and a half ago, I was like, oh, Penix went to Washington. And all of a sudden, he's been lighting it up. Last week against Michigan State, he threw for almost 400 yards. He lit up the Spartans. Will he do that against Stanford? Ryan Tracy, Michael Penix, more or less 300 passing yards against Stanford's defense.
300? Right at it? I think the matchup with Stanford's secondary is going to give him, and Polk is the young kid that's going to be ripping it up. I think they're going to have an opportunity there. I'll take the more on 300 yards, but the less than 4 touchdowns.
Okay. All right. Eric Crocker, you saw that Stanford defense. They didn't stop Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison, or anybody that day. Can they stop Michael Penix for less than 300 yards, or are you saying more than 300 yards?
More. And I'm smashing the more button. All right. This is a guy who has thrown for 397 yards, which he just did last week, 4 touchdowns, 337 yards, 345 yards. Now, I know Portland State they're not the greatest in competition, but you go to Michigan State, you play against them, and you just destroy them like that through the air. This is a guy who's going to really put the ball in the air. He's going to throw for a ton of yards. So 300, I think they should have upped that. Matter of fact, don't do it so I can go and place a nice little thing.
PrizePicks.com. Make sure you hit more than 300 passing yards, says Eric Crocker. At Eric_Crocker if it's wrong, and we'll reimburse you. Not really. Okay, last one. He's number 1 prospect in the Harris 100. He's number 1 prospect throughout the country. Will Anderson Jr., more or less 3.5 impact plays. And I've titled the impact play as a sack, a TFL, or forced fumble. 3.5 total impact plays versus Vandy. So there's a lot to think about. He's got to get 3.5, more or less 3.5. But it's Vandy. So he might only have to do it in 2 quarters because he might be out in the second half. Ryan Tracy, we'll start with you. More or less, Will Anderson Jr., 3.5 impact plays.
It's a tough one because I agree. They're going to be up. They're going to be throwing. He's going to have opportunity, but how long is he going to be in that bowl? And that's the problem. I'll tell you this, too. He better have them. He better keep stepping up. He better get back to being the number one prospect that we all thought he was. I think he will get it done against them. So I will take the more. Thank you very much.
Eric Crocker, more or less 3.5 impact plays for Will Anderson Jr.
You say he's number one on the Harris 100 big board. He's number one overall on Eric Crocker's big board and probably everyone in America's big board, right?
Yep, absolutely.
But no, I'm taking less with this. Again, I agree with everything that y'all saying. I don't think he's going to play that much. Now, I'm being a little disrespectful because I actually work with a defensive back on Vanderbilt. I hope he has a good game. I'm thinking about traveling to the game to go watch my guy, Jeremy Lucen. Shout out to him. But I just think, obviously, Alabama's going to be too much. And they just play so fast defensively. Yeah. I don't think that Will Anderson's going to play enough to get those 3.5 impact plays that you're asking for.
I agree with you. I still think you can do it in 2 quarters, but it is Vandy. So I think he's probably going to play a couple quarters, hang him up, and start getting ready for the rest of the season. Big weekend in college football. Arkansas taking on A&M, Florida taking on Tennessee, Wisconsin, Ohio State. We talked about a lot of that here, and there'll be a ton more we talk about over the coming weeks right here on Locked On NFL Draft. For Ryan Tracy and Eric Crocker, the 2 best co-hosts that I've ever had, I am John Harris. It's been Locked On NFL Draft. We appreciate you guys making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen every day. Now make your second listen to Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts, anywhere. Boys, it's been fun. Appreciate you for listening to us each and every day. Keep it right here, Locked On NFL Draft. See you next time. Let's go.
Peace.